Nice to have you on board. There he is, Dr. Mark. On his way in, everybody. Connecting.
Morning.
There he is. Hey, Mark.
Good morning, Andrew. How you doing?
Good, good. And yourself?
All good. Thank you very much. All good.
Good. Where are you hunkering down?
We're in Orlando currently, so I mean, as far as places to be kind of shipwrecked, it's not too bad a place. So
Yeah,
so
that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Mark, are you based in Orlando at the moment?
yes, I'm based at Sean Foley's Academy in Timucuan, so that's about 45 minutes north of the city. So Orlando's home, but I kind of spend equal amounts of time between really London and Orlando. So I was actually meant to be in London this week, but because of obviously the current conditions, then that's obviously been kind of pressed pause on. So yeah, between kind of Orlando and London is kind of home for me.
Okay, gotcha.
So, two nice places.
How's the family?
The family are great, thankfully. So my wife, daughter, and myself are here. So the three of us now live in Orlando. And so when I go home, I typically go on my own for a week or so, and then the girls remain here. So they get the good stuff. I hope they get to stay in the nice places. But no, so we've only been here 3 months, and so far it's been great. So obviously,
That's good. Yeah, Orlando's a good spot, eh?
Cool spot, and Sean's been, I mean, beyond kind and generous to me. So we've been based at the academy and what have you. So just one of the truly great humans, Sean. So yeah, one of the good guys.
He's a top man. Yeah, he's a top man.
He is the best.
Guys, I just want to make sure. Can everybody hear well? Mark, I think can you turn your sound up a little bit?
Yeah, it's on full volume now, so hopefully...
You're on full volume. Okay, it might be my phone. I'm struggling to hear a little bit, but I can make it out. That's why, please, I apologize for my face being so close to my device. I'm just trying to hear as well as I can. Mark, how did you get into this? The first time I heard your name was from a good buddy of mine, Brian Ridley, the Riddler.
Yeah.
And he's done a lot with you, I think.
Yeah, Brian and I have been friends a long time, Andrew, and so Brian's from the same part of England my mum's from, so there's a connection already from a kind of a family background. My mum's from Newcastle in the North East, which is where Brian's from, so that's where that initial kind of connection came from.
Okay.
So really, my experience is a junior player, really, so I think a lot of our, call it what you want, consultancy, coaching kind of philosophies come from our own experiences as kind of young players. So I think we often coach based on our own failures, or certainly I think our own perceived failures. So how we perceived our development, our coaching background as younger people, I think very much kind of guide us and then shape us perhaps when we get to into our kind of coaching background. So I was an okay, fairly good junior player. I was a plus figure handicap. I had kind of a badge simply how I moved in my goal swing. So way back then, the coaches were great people. I mean, very cool people indeed. They just didn't have the information and the know-how and the awareness we have now. This is 25 years ago, I guess it would be now. So simply through the way I moved on my goal swing, my swing, for example, caused a really bad neck injury, a bad rib cage injury, which I still occasionally get reminded now that's not happy about something. So even 25 years on from moving that way, I get the occasional one I go, it doesn't like that, which is another reason why we moved to Orlando to Wolf. I hope the heat, the heat and old age will resolve this. So it was mainly my experience as a junior player. I was very curious, always loved anatomy, loved obviously the physiology, the kind of the movement side of things as a junior player. And in a very, very, in a very polite way, that I'd asked the question, and the guys just simply didn't know, just because it's where they were at or where golf coaching was at 30 years ago. So that really then, my own aspiration, my own intrigue and curiosity, I guess, really then became quite evident and quite dominant then as far as I could. I need to learn about this because I always thought I could have been okay. I thought I could have been who knows, I could have been an okay player, but I played 9 holes in being that much pain. I had to kind of walk off the golf course, so it was pretty bad.
Really? Yeah.
And that's why I think in some ways, I mean, kind of success leaves clues in life. Certainly history kind of leaves many clues. That we kind of pick them together, it reveals so much. And I think it's my experiences have probably never been more evident and relevant with where kids are at these days. I mean, some can be so bad at movement, and some of the concepts you see encouraged within golf coaching, the last thing I want is someone to become me again. So I'm very big on that, how we move and things are done responsibly, and good physiology, good anatomy, good biomechanics, that kind of stuff. So really my own background.
Okay. And Mark, tell us, we chatted a little bit before we got online here together, and one of the things I really wanted to dig deep on with you was get into some pelvic motion and how the pelvis moves, and what some of your findings are with better players. What can we as coaches, we as golfers, because there's both dialed in here today, what can we as a community work towards, and just even if it's not perhaps measuring in a 3D motion like you tend to do, you're so good at doing, what can we look for and perhaps just understand better when it comes to the pelvis and that pelvic motion throughout the golf swing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, of all the segments we have, I guess, so you look at all the segments, the foot and ankle, well, that's a joint in the segment, but call it the foot, pelvis, the rib cage, the head, the hand. I think of all the segments we have, it's still the one where you see the least amount of variability. So despite it being very visibly very different, so you can line up, and this is what makes such great discussions, Andrew. You can line up probably the 20 top players in the world currently, and quite notably and quite visibly, they all move very different, which is actually quite a neat thing to have. But certain threads, and there's certain themes that inadvertently and very overtly, they all do very well. And probably the one segment which is still less variable, less exposed to, say, concept or what have you, still how the pelvis moves. So if there's one segment I think we can all move well, and certainly you're already, again, using that kind of, success leaves clues approach, it's the one segment which I think typically most players move, certainly most established and advanced players, and the very best players in the world that I've been very lucky to spend time with, all move in a very similar way. So there's a lot
of like that.
Hand and wrist stuff, very variable, and that's what makes that's what makes such good discussions. How the spine moves, again, it's an area which I'm certainly spending much time around discussing with people currently. Even foot and ankle, there can be a lot of variability around that, but certainly through the pelvis, it's the most probably robust and reliable segment we still have as far as pain avoidance, force production, club delivery, how it influences rotation, very adaptable, very intuitive movers. So a lot of very clear threads and movements we see through the pelvis, which someone actually asked me this the other day on a webinar, that I've been very blessed. I've worked with 10 major champions in excess of 150 something tour players. I've been very fortunate, very, very privileged in my career that I've never seen one of those guys not move this way. So that's a pretty good sample size, and it's even not so much the sample size used, it's more what samples do you use when you're looking at research. So
and I must say, just from a golf coaching perspective, in talking to smart people like yourself, that's an unusual answer. It's almost always, well, it depends on the person. It's, it can be this, it can be that. And so I like that, because I know I'm going to be able to take some concrete information and go, this is pretty much how it should be. Obviously not for everybody, but if you wish to do it well, this is how it should be.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, on every level there, Andrew, absolutely right. You look at all the other segments, I mean, there's so much variability, so much kind of individual movements, influenced by so many things: anatomy, concept, perception, history, equipment, environment, all these things that influence how we move. But even allowing for all of that, and this isn't even my beliefs. These aren't my belief systems. These are just things I've observed. So these values have essentially come from observing people, not attempting to kind of encourage this. So to give you some examples of what the pelvis can do, that certainly where it's very similar amongst almost all players in transition and as they move into an approach impact. So if you like, I can certainly share some examples of what the pelvis does in almost all these players, if that would help.
Please do, yeah.
I've never seen anyone whose right side, again, assuming they're right-handed players, where the right side of the pelvis elevates in transition. For almost every player, I mean, are they attempting to do this? Who knows? That's what makes it such fun. coaching. Are they aware of moving this way? Most likely not, but almost everybody's right side of their pelvis remains down in transition. So I'm using my hands if I can crudely, so that's my right hip and left hip. I've never seen anyone ever move that way in transition. I think sometimes when you use kind of motion capture, it really depends on what system is being used. So if someone is measuring the orientation of the pelvis, and a lot of it also depends on how they define top of backswing as well. It can maybe display like it does that, but in reality it never does. I mean, almost every player I've almost always seen, if that's my right and left hip, the pelvis will, as it glides and moves left in transition, the right side remains downwards. How much the pelvis has that?
So hold on, just to clarify there, Mark, you said the right side remains down. Does that mean it doesn't go up?
Absolutely right. So it can remain. You can. Again, this is where words become such fun, because it's all down to that ambiguous kind of interpretation. Then, which is again what makes it. That's why Brian and I got on so well, because he's such a good speaker. And how much that right side remains level or stays down is one of those things. It just doesn't elevate and move upwards. So I've never seen, again, never's a poor word to use, but I've never seen in any very, very good move of that lateral flexion, the side bend is often referred to, of that value reduced, which is the negative plot, ever reduced in a very, very advanced play, certainly pain-free.
Okay.
Guys that do move that way almost invariably get some kind of spine issue, wrist issue, neck issue.
I would think so.
Because of the compression around the rib cage is going this way, the pelvis is going that way, so the compression on one side and the tension on the other side, it just becomes not sustainable. So that's certainly one. Another one which is very common is how much the pelvis thrusts or moves away from the ball. So
At what point, Mark?
Beg your pardon?
At what point?
In transition. So how much?
Okay.
So what TPI would refer to as what do they call it? Hip extension. Is it early extension? Sorry, my mistake. It's the opposite. The pelvis moves a long way.
Okay.
I mean, in the very, very good ones, Andrew, when you can look in close to 10 centimeters of movement away from the ball, from their top of back.
Are you referring to the center of the pelvis? Okay.
So it's called the origin, the middle of the pelvis.
Gotcha.
So it depends again on what motion capture system is being used and how they calibrate and define the axes of the pelvis. But if you look at the pelvis as a segment, the origin, the middle of that pelvis. So I get some guys, some of the most outstanding ball strikers, and again, these guys are very fortunate with major championships, can get close to 10 centimeters further back than their top of backswing position.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I've only, how many guys, you're making me think now, which is a good thing. How many guys did I see last year play on tour? Probably 40 maybe. I'm trying to think. That's probably a very inaccurate number. That's a very quick number. Only one guy that I see in transition had lots of thrust or extension in his pelvis, and he missed 6 months of the season with wrist pain.
That's interesting.
Big correlation between those that get wrist pain. Invariably look at without kind of digressing too much, because we'll come back to the pelvis more in a second, but invariably guys that get wrist pain, look at what the pelvis is doing. Those that get low back and hip pain, look at what the wrist is doing. So typically when there's kind of wrist pain in players, invariably comes on how the pelvis moves. And people that get kind of low back pain, invariably comes on what the wrist does.
That's interesting.
So that's it's a bit of a kind of global way of seeing things, but it's pretty accurate for most of that. And then another really very evident movement that the very, very best players, the really good players do, is as the pelvis approaches impact, Andrew. So that's why you're so accurate and so true in what you said, that it's the middle of the pelvis, that how much the pelvis elevates and moves up as it approaches impacts. So if you look at their start position, and I'll do it crudely with my hands, apologies.
Yeah.
That's their start position. As they move into impact, how much the pelvis is elevating as it rotates. So it's not thrusting forwards, it's not moving into that posterior bend as much. It's how much it elevates and moves up, which is really representative of how well they're pushing downwards. How well they push that vertical push down into that deep foot and ankle, into that hip. The response then from the reaction forces are how much the pelvis moves upwards. Along with like how much the obliques, those big spiral systems we have, those muscular systems that we have, pull on the pelvis. So again, I mean, I've either seen a really established player whose pelvis is lower at impact than their start position. I'd have to really sit in a dark room with a strong coffee and look at that one. That will take a bit of investigation. I'm sure there's someone somewhere.
There's always an outlier.
There's always someone somewhere, which is great. But I mean, that's why I love your question there, because you're so true. That you look at of all the segments we have, it's still the one which is, regardless of someone's belief systems, their concepts, their perceptions, anatomical constraints, environment, all these influences that control what we do, it's still the one where there's minimal variability between the very, very best movers and best move strikers to, say, recreational players.
That was good.
And Mark, you know, on the elevate portion that you mentioned there, you must see differences from like an 8-iron to a driver.
Massively. Absolutely right.
Okay.
So that you look at it, the actual movement remains very similar, and that's a good observation. The movement remains very similar, it's just done on a very, very different scale.
Okay.
So you look at same move, just scaled differently. So a lot less on, say, a wedge than there would be from, say, a guy hit the driver absolutely kind of, foot down and hits it out. Massively, so massively. Which is evident in long drive guys, at how much they elevate their pelvis.
Sure.
But long driving in golf, like comparing 100-meter sprints and marathon runners, I mean, it's just pointless, really. So it's no point.
Okay. And I saw one of the questions, Mark. Does the pelvis at any point, the center of the pelvis, let's just kind of stick with that. Does the center of the pelvis ever move towards the ball in the swing?
Let's take a massive assumption that anatomically they're good. There's no constraints. So, for example, there's no foot and ankle issue. Ironically, using me as an example, the reason why I had my neck issue was I had a foot issue. So I adapted through my neck as a way of moving around my foot. That was the history behind my pain. So allowing for there's no real imbalances through their system. Possibly a little bit, there'd be a little bit of movement through backswing where you might see, but we're talking 1 or 2 centimeters typically. It might move a little bit because it rotates. The actual middle of the pelvis isn't really changing position too much. So if you look at it, say, from a camera, from the 2-dimensional view, for sure, the lead hip will absolutely move a little bit towards the ball.
Okay.
But that's
for sure.
Because it's rotating. But the actual origin, as you so rightly say, Andrew, doesn't move forwards. And then, certainly post-impact, and around about halfway through, it will then very much move towards the ball because, obviously, if they start to extend and move upwards. But certainly in advance of impact, if they do it, I've yet to see it. I mean, there's only sample one. I've never seen it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I've not seen it.
I must say, as a coach, Mark, that's cool information for me, because that just heightens. I know I can think of 5 or 6 students that I'm working with who really push. They lose their angles, they early extend, they stand and deliver, and that heightens my passion to get them out of that. It really gives me some extra fuel. I've always known we need to get them out of that, but I really am going to focus, double down on working towards getting them to feel like the center of their pelvis moves away from the golf ball.
Yes, and then anytime, again, this is only my experience with that, so apologies if I'm inaccurate. Anytime someone, I think, thrusts their pelvis or has that extension, typically it's the brain's GPS saying, how do I get to here from here? How do I get to impact from top of backswing? So I call the pelvis the second brain within anatomy. Almost all adaptation we make within movement happens through the pelvis. So anytime there's a pelvis thrust or an early extension, for me, there's no such thing. It's an adaptation to something happening elsewhere. It's how their GPS says, how do I get the club-defined impact from here when, say, for example, the spine's in this position, the club's in that position, the foot lives in this position. They have to adapt and adjust their pelvis to find impact. A good example would be something like NFL. You look at the very good quarterbacks, they're looking at the players on the field and their hands in that position, but all the adaptation comes to their feet and their pelvis. So they're looking, but look at good martial artists, it's all through hips and pelvis. but they're looking at you and I like you and I are looking at each other now. So anytime someone has a thrust in their pelvis or an extension of their pelvis, almost always it's because there's something happening elsewhere. So for me to get better at that, we got to get better at this. So
Okay.
I said the most, never try and change what you see or feel, because the minute you see it, the issue's already happened.
Oh, that's a cool one. That's a good one to write down. Never try and change what you see or feel. Or film, I think you said. Yes.
Feel, as in F, that's my bad English accent, sorry, Andrew.
I don't know, you know, hey, my accent's a lot more twisted than yours, Mark. But just wait, we're going to give you a decade in Orlando and see what happens. Eh?
Yeah, I think my will let me come home.
You get stuck in the middle of the ocean like me. I'm half American, half South African, accent-wise.
Big great nation, so you're doing a good job.
So, okay, I wanted to, one other thing, I think somebody posted a question. You mentioned low back pain is invariably wrists.
Yes.
A product of wrists.
Almost. Almost always, yes, almost always.
Okay, and so if someone has low back pain, what would you expect to see with wrist action?
A lot of adjustment and adaptation in transition. So I think a lot of, especially we'll make it more about kind of established in more advanced players. Now I think with recreational players, it's a lot more influence around it. So people that there's a lot of adaptation in their wrist and transition. There's lots of adjustment in their wrist because they're either attempting to conceptually achieve something or move their club in a certain way. But whenever we kind of start to adapt the wrist in whatever direction it may be, the actual adjustments then start to happen through the spine and then subsequently into the pelvis. So, as an example, I try to show you best on the screen today that if I move my shirt collar, although it's just my collar moving, every single atom in my shirt is moving in response. I mean, every fibre of my shirt is moving now. And it's a bit like that within anatomy. If I deliberately try to attempt to move the wrist in a certain way in transition, which is our way of trying to find impact, it's actually the wrist, it's actually the pelvis, the spine adjusting and adapting to allow the wrist to move that way. So it puts the pelvis in the spine in such a poor position anatomically. Often then we get low back pain.
Okay.
So to actually get better, if you get back pain, you've got to look at what the wrist is doing. Almost, I'm being really generic now, Andrew, so really apologies to your view.
That's okay.
90% plus of low back pain comes from what the wrist do in transition.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. And Mark, I see we've got to get your camera on a higher friction surface. We've been speaking about friction because your phone keeps wanting to slide down when you get
I'll lock it. There we go.
I'm just my golf coach brain is thinking that I'm like, that phone wants to slide.
Lock mode. I hope that's better now. So.
That's cool. That's cool. Mark, you've been talking a lot about the wrists.
Yeah.
What are your findings? Obviously, there's a lot. Hey, there's a lot. Is there something you see? You used the number earlier, 90+%. That 90+% of the better golfers out there do when it comes to wrist action. There's a bunch. But what do you see a lot of better players do at some point?
It's a funny one, this, because essentially the wrist only responds to what the hands do. So the hand, you look at that, the hand is a segment, but the wrist is a joint. So the hand moves through space, controls what the wrist does. So a great one would be try and move your wrist without moving your hand.
No, I just had a friend.
So we can.
Not happening.
The wrist is simply responding to what the hand does in space. So for me, I'm more curious to what the hands do rather than what the wrist does, because the wrist is simply the joint which is adapting to how the hands are moving. Okay. So a lot of it comes back to it just really comes back to what kind of motion capture system is being used. If we just have wrist data for sure, or it doesn't matter what data, it might just be pelvis data, you look at what that segment's doing. It's a much more expansive question to understand why is it moving that way. So every movement we make within life is controlled by what the hands are, how the hands move through space. It might be, for example, hey Andrew, can you pass me that coffee? your hands will move through space to complete the task. How the shoulder moves, how the spine moves, how the wrist moves, or adapting to how the hands move through space. So even kicking a soccer ball, then the hands will move in wonderful directions to allow the foot to kick the ball. So everything's controlled in movement by what the hands do. So how the hands move for me is a much more reliable reference than what the wrists do, because the wrist is simply adapted to the hand movement. But I use the wrist to keep it kind of clean for the viewers today. I mean, what you normally typically see in very good players, again, the very healthy ones and the very powerful ones, is there's not huge amounts of an increase in extension in transition alongside radial deviation. So the idea of the wrist going into, I'll try and show as best I can, lots of extension with radial deviation. The compression you see around kind of scaphoid in here, in the tissues through here, can be just not sustainable. So anytime you see excessive amounts of, I'll try and show this, where the wrist goes radial deviation pronation, it's never ideal, and equally so when that lead wrist goes into flexion alongside radial deviation in transition that way. So anytime you see these movements, I mean, just the correlation to pain and adaptation elsewhere is just pretty significant. So typically the very best players, for sure, you'll see a little bit of movement this way, almost in every good player. I don't like using the word good, but we use good because it's easy today. Almost in every good player you'll see this, but it's not the wrist that encouraged that movement. It's actually how the spine and pelvis move that anatomically and physiologically create the response through the wrist. So do the very best players overtly and purposely do this? Not that I've ever seen, but do the wrist move that way because of how they rotate their system? Almost absolutely, yeah. There was the rotation of the pelvis, the spine, through foot and ankle, the myofascial system, the elastic system that we have within movement. That's what then the end response is. It creates that.
Okay.
Rather than have I ever seen any player ever do this?
I must say, I've had very little success in trying to get everyday golfers to go. They just don't.
Yeah, I mean, if you get them rotating better, like what you said was so accurate, you're so right in everything you said at the start, that when their pelvis moves well, almost invariably their wrist moves well.
Yeah.
But then, again, you'll know this more than most people, but then if you revert that, if their kind of wrist moves poorly, normally their pelvis moves poorly. So those segments are inherently connected. So I think that's why I loved your question at the start there, Andrew. And, if everyone moves their pelvis well, I'd love to see it in a very fun way, how their wrists and hands then start to adapt.
That would be so interesting, wouldn't it?
So you're right. I mean, you're right. Get the pelvis moving great. The wrists, I think, will respond in a very intuitive way, because then it's allowing for the external influences, gravity, the acceleration of the club, the external physics, so that kind of stuff. That's what makes the us.
Mark, another thing, just kind of jumping back to the pelvis. Let's say my fist is the lead side of the pelvis, my elbow is the trail side of the pelvis. Okay?
Yep.
So I wind into the backswing, and this is going to show lefty. It's going to show, that's why I'm going lead side right here. I wind into the backswing. My trail side elevates. My lead side gets lower.
Yep.
Now I move away from the golf ball, and I start transition.
Yeah.
Okay. You said this never happens. Okay. That
help players, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 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 In proper players. How long do you see that the lead side of the pelvis stay lower than the trail side until they get to impact, where it starts to work up and gets traded out almost?
Yeah, nice question. If we want to keep it really kind of fairly kind of playful and clean again, just to keep it easy for Instagram.
Yeah.
I mean, the right side, so that's my right and left hip. The right hip will remain a little higher in transition, but it's descending downwards.
Yes.
It's a bit like saying my wrist is an ulnar deviation there. It's radially deviating now, but it's still in ulnar deviation.
I see.
There's only
Okay. It's moving towards.
absolutely right. This is moving towards that way. So you're absolutely right in what you said there. I mean, typically around about when the lead arm's kind of parallel, or the pelvis is about 0 degrees rotation in downswing. So when the pelvis gets to its 0 rotation, which is around about about half to 3/4 down, that kind of that 0 level value.
Okay.
So get some, and I know it's hard because of the constraints of cameras and what have you, but when that kind of lead arm's around about, probably here, if you can see it best on camera, and the pelvis has got back to its kind of 0 rotation, normally it's kind of, there's no lateral bend in the pelvis.
Okay. Gotcha. Mark, I must say, this is great stuff. I love to, it gets me as a coach to look at things differently and go, okay, I see those hands working that way. I see that club getting out of position. What can I do to rectify that other than going, hey, you've got to put your club not here, you've got to put your club there. Do that. It's influencing how the club gets in the right spot, ultimately, is what I hear you saying.
Massive. It kind of goes back to that comment that you and I said at the start, that to get better at this, we've got to get better at that. And what you see over here is just a response to things that happen over here. So never change what you see or feel, because the minute we see it as observers and the player feels it, the issue's already happened. That's just their way of moving around that problem. So if you see, I think, any issues through foot and ankle, invariably never change foot and ankle. Go understand why the foot and ankle is moving that way. If you see an issue, say what the shoulder does or the neck does, it's understanding why the neck's adapting that way. They're no different with the club. If the club's moving in a certain, if there's a behaviour through the club, it's understanding what's making the club and influencing the club to move in that direction, not, hey player, just go and put the club there. All that does is change aesthetics.
Correct.
Visual.
Correct.
What have you really resolved with that? It's like saying, if you've got certain kind of ground reaction force movements and you put them in different shoes, what does that really resolve? Nothing. You haven't really explored why the foot's not moving very well. For me, the best shoe is still skin. I mean, I kind of say that most guys, high-tech shoes, low-tech feet. So the better the shoe, the worse the foot. It's still, skin is our best shoe. That's what Mum and Dad gave us on day one. So it's letting the foot move well. Then we'll really understand ground reaction. So just using different shoe design, for sure you'll get a response. Is it really resolving anything? Who knows? There's no difference to the club. Just shifting the club around. Yeah, some guys. And this is what makes it such fun, Andrew. I mean, it makes it such fun. You get two types of people within movement, what you call responders and non-responders. It's understanding what guys respond to and what guys don't respond to. Now, I've been around many guys that, again, these guys could have made a championship. You say just put the club in that position, they'll go win the Masters. That's just how they see the world. That's just their belief system. Some guys need intellectual discussion.
Yes, according to the data, none of the
Yeah.
So really, I guess my role as a consultant is just to understand what people respond to. Some guys respond to this, some guys respond to that.
It is so interesting, isn't it? It's I was talking with Chris Como the other day, and he said, ultimately, as a golf coach, we've got to have this massive toolbox, but we are just problem solvers, and we've got to put solutions on the table that the player can pick up and play with.
I think we're even more advanced. I think we've got to be problem creators, not problem solvers. Our role within creative coaching is actually create problems, so then the player learns to solve them. So I think, I mean, I don't know Chris, so I say that with great love. I mean, and Chris is right, of course he's right, but I think we've got to go further back than that. We've got to be problem creators. Let's create a problem. So you, the player, has to find a way to resolve it and achieve this. That's then learning.
Yeah.
Comes into defining learning.
Crazy expensive.
I see what you're saying. I just know that my students, everyday golfers, if I said, guys, welcome to my academy. I'm so excited to have you here for the next 3 days. I'm going to go out of my way to create problems for you. they wouldn't. I get what you're saying, but
you do it in a fun way. I mean, you don't play for
yeah.
Okay, let's only use a 6-iron and play bunker shots.
Yeah.
You in a fun way of creating an issue. So
Correct.
for me, constraints create freedom. When you create a constraint, it creates much freedom in life. So it's interesting. I mean, with the awful situation that the world finds itself in today with the virus, which is just dreadful. How, what you're doing now is so creative because we're having to be creative now. So the world unfortunately has created this situation we're having to deal with. So because of that problem, you've now become very creative at using Instagram and what you're now doing so well. That's an answer to that question. We've had this problem created for us, unfortunately. There's so many guys doing great stuff now online because they have to.
Yeah.
That's a bit like
and Crossfield said it as well. He said, what do teachers love to do? Teachers love to teach. And I just find myself sitting at home going crazy. My wife is like, could you please go away and go and do something? And so this was an idea I came up with, and it's really been a great outlet for me. And it seems like people are enjoying it and people are watching. So really,
I mean, it's an awful thing to say. It's kind of meant this in a fun way. Without the current virus that we have, this would probably never happen.
True.
But I mean that obviously. I'm sure everyone sees it that way. It's meant in a completely different way. That so the constraints that we have currently being, I'm in Orange County. We were on lockdown for 4 weeks.
What time will you be?
We're having to get so creative in how we see things.
Yeah.
But without the unfortunate situation, who knows?
100% right. Essentially, we are now in a bunker with the 6-iron. The sandwich has been taken away. The good lives
I just
are
popped
gone,
it off for a second or two and
figure it out and go, okay, this is a problem that's been created. We didn't ask for it, but how do we deal with it? And that ties in. That's a great, actually, analogy there to what you were saying in that, yes, we do need to create problems to get the player to adapt and go, aha, I can do that. I can figure out how to move properly.
Massive. I use my daughter, and my daughter's approaching 2 years of age, and she must dislike me hugely so much. Because you look at parents, they give their kids everything. So I'm so annoyed with my daughter, excuse me, that I will put a ball about a foot away from her, and I'm always moving it. So she's always having to learn to adapt different arms, different hands, to kind of reach and move around. So I hope you look at her now when she's around her friends, how advanced she is with movement and problem solving, because of the environment. I hope in a good way. I hope this is in a good way. And then great that we let her do it. We let her stand up. We let her reach. We move things around for her, rather than the helicopter parent that kind of hovers above their kids and does it for them. That's not learning.
No, that's not learning. That's not learning. Mark, talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned it a lot today, foot and ankle and what you look for. If you wouldn't mind, just spend some time, maybe 5 minutes, talking about that.
Yeah, so feet and ankles are a great one. We could spend 5 or 6 days on this, so we try and compress into 5 minutes. You've asked a really wonderful question there. For sure, let's say forget golf, ignore golf momentarily, just wonderful foot and ankle movements, say within rotation in golf. So essentially the feet are a little bit like tripods. So imagine, we'll just use my right foot as an example. So how do I position that so you see it? So that's my heel, my ankle, kind of big toe, little toe. So the feet kind of sit on the floor a bit like tripods. So when the foot interacts, and this actually applies to both feet, when the feet interact with the ground while at press, we'll have equal pressure across all 3 points on each foot.
Right now, I know a lot of people are.
That if you ignore what the hands and arms do, so we'll come back to the hands and arms in the club in a second. So if you had, say, hands and arms across rib cage like so, that as you rotate through backswing within wonderful rotation anatomically, there would be no change in pressure across those 6 points as you rotate. So essentially almost be maybe 49% pressure on the right side, the trail side, sorry. So in pure rotation, there'll be no change in those pressure points on the foot. What moves pressure around more is the change in hand, and again the hands. The hands are now moving through space this way, the weight of the club's in a different position.
Yeah.
That's what moves pressure certainly through backswing. And then when we start to look at the downswing, then what's very, very important, and we'll kind of give you one example today. Imagine this is my my big toe, and you can see that long bone here. So in the with the metatarsal, the long bone here. But as we start downswing, the line of force in the front. So when we move in rotation, all the force is pushed along. Try and show that a minute. With that long metatarsal. So when we move into transition, it goes back to the pelvis again. All the pressure and all the force moves along that long bone into that big toe. So the big toe is the jumping joint. When we jump up, real muscle that contracts, and the last joint to leave the floor is the big toe. So another reason why when the pelvis elevates, it's almost anatomically impossible to move. This is in transition, the idea of the right side elevator. It's almost impossible to move pressure along that metatarsal. So if using you as a model now, Andrew, which I'm sure you've had much experience doing, if you make a rotate back for me, and then just let the right side elevate, you almost lose that connection through that metatarsal in transition. So you can't move force along it. When the right side of the pelvis remains down, you can then push force along that long body.
I got you. I can feel that. Yeah.
That is the elastic point of rotation. The elastic rotation with regards to systems along that bone.
That's so interesting. Just in tying, just as I do this, just in tying that right kind of side of the trail side of the pelvis not elevating allows me to pressure into that toe and that.
It's almost like it moves along the foot, down that metatarsal, jump off that big toe. There's another reason why I say, and I've kind of, I've learned, I use the word learn very, very inaccurate. I've learned this in the US the last time, so I've never watched basketball really, but I've watched a lot of it. These guys are so good at golf typically because they jump so much, because they're so good at moving pressure through that foot, through that big toe. I mean, these guys are the most wonderful athletes. I mean, nothing about pressure. They move along that long bone and that into that toe so well, which is why they jump so good. Try jumping with your big toe off the floor.
It's I've just been standing here playing around with that, just some of that sensation. And I must say, Mark, I do like that tripod illustration you gave. Just and based on, I think oftentimes I stand, my feet get a little this way, and so my pinkies get off the ground. They don't contribute enough as far as pressure goes.
Massively. So that's, so in some ways it kind of threads and ties this discussion together well. So if you and I were doing a session with you, my question would be is to understand why the foot was in that position. Now, is it habitual? Is it shoe design? Is it historically what you do? Is there a constraint at the hip, at the spine, at the rib cage? It kind of goes back to my neck issue I had 20 years ago is because my foot position, which ironically is kind of how you stand. So it's only when I resolved my foot that I actually resolved my neck issue. When my foot is my whole right side of my body then did that.
Low frequency radio
press my neck. I had years of physiotherapy on my neck, but it would give me a remedial relief. Oh, it kind of feels good today. I think 50 balls and the balance to go back. It's only when my foot moved well, did my whole right side restore and lengthen again. So you're absolutely right. So even using the lead foot, allowing for any hip issues and spine issues and constraints. The left foot as a tripod, you keep those three connection points until pretty much the point of impact. And obviously post-impact, there's lots of movement onto that left part of the foot, supinates and inverts. So there's lots of movement that way. Excuse me. Sorry, Andrew. But even until impact, those 3 points on that left foot, when you really move pressure through the feet right along that metatarsal well, that left big toe would still keep connection on the ground. Otherwise, it's very counterintuitive too. How can the pelvis elevate as it approaches impacts, without the big toe being on the floor? So
Yeah.
even if you and a foam weight, kind of lift your big toe off the floor, try and push your hip up as you approach impact.
You've already moved the timeline once.
Yeah, it almost it doesn't feel right.
Now put your toe on the floor and try and do it.
Yeah, that's so much easier.
So where these concepts have come from that let your foot hit the ground impact. Often you see these guys now take wrists, and take elbows, bad knees.
Unforeseen obstacles.
Yeah. So here's a question for you, Mark. I see a lot of players. This is their lead foot at impact. That if this is the toe, at impact that toe is off the ground. Okay.
I think 2 or 3 frames in advance of impact.
Gotcha. Okay, I see that. That makes sense.
But often these guys who get lots of their big toe off the floor now, look at their wrist, their wrist tapes, their knees are in braces, their spine's taped, they've got ribcage issues.
Yeah.
Very, very healthy, good movements. The guys that are really, sustainable, just good movements, you rarely see it. Now, it's like you rightly said, there's always someone some great fun.
Yeah.
Always someone somewhere. And I'm sure that your viewers are rightly saying, what about X? And that's what makes it neat. This is 90% of the population.
And, often
like it's 1%. That's what the Tigers
Yeah. I often talk to my golfers about outliers. Colin Montgomery, Eamon Darcy, Jim Furyk, Hideki pausing at the top. People will go, well, he's so good, I've got to pause at the top. Well, let's look at what the other 99% really good golfers do. They don't do that. And so let's not get distracted, I think. Oftentimes we do, particularly as coaches, we get distracted by the outliers. Let's look at what the mass of really good golfers do and say, let's try to get this 18 handicapper, this 8 handicapper to do more of what they're doing, the mass is doing, instead of just really harping on this outlier.
You are so true. You look at good examples, say Usain Bolt in sprinting. Now, Usain Bolt eats chicken nuggets. Is that advisable for an athlete? No. Usain Bolt just chose his parents so well in life. Good for him. You made 2 very good choices. You look at Johan Cruyff in soccer, smoked.
Yeah.
He won the best soccer players in the 70s, used to smoke cigarettes. Now we know what smoking. My dad currently has bladder cancer because he smoked 30 years ago. My dad hasn't smoked since the 80s, but the TAR's system still, so he has bladder cancer, unfortunately, still because of smoking. So we know what smoking does to us. So Cruyff, one of those people, we actually, unfortunately, this issue came through smoking, so I believe later in life. But you always get these exceptions. Bolt eats chicken nuggets. Smoked. Based on what we know through, if we know these things aren't good for us and we still do it, then don't complain when it goes wrong. My dad's on the planet, so what do you want me to say? I smoked in the 70s. What do you want me to say?
In the 70s, it was okay.
My mum smoked when she was pregnant with me.
My mom did too. Yeah.
Explains.
That's why this one ear is a bit lower than the other.
My friend said that explains many things. Well, because we didn't. So it goes back to that. Success leaves clues in life. History leaves clues. If we know this, why would you ignore it?
Yeah. And there will always be people that'll ignore it. There will always be people that'll do things that are not good for them. But I think. And that's the cool thing about what we're doing is we're sharing information, we're sharing good information from someone who's really a true expert, and hopefully as coaches, as golfers, we can say, I have a choice, I can either ignore that and continue doing what I've always done, or I can take that on board and try to become better as far as being a golf coach, as far as being a golfer, as far as being a healthy human being. That's really what we're after.
I had it with a young lady recently whose dad was unfortunately a bit too involved in the session. Well, I kind of made a suggestion that if we use history as an example, if you keep doing this, maybe your wrists will be very unhappy with you. And the dad got really offended by this. I even suggested that possibly how his daughter was moving may create a wrist issue. Unfortunately, a year on, she had surgery on her wrist. and she was a very good player, European tour player, good player. And so the dad phoned me up and goes, "Oh, I want to come and see you." I said, "Why?" I said, what do I say to you today? I didn't say to you 12 months ago.
Yeah.
I said, that's on you. You allowed that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was
Choices.
I was only being honest. I mean, in essence, because your ego got deeply challenged by me saying that what you're doing may create an issue. Unfortunately, there's only one person lost there, your daughter, bless her, hurt her wrist. So, why would you ignore it? Why would you ignore it?
I often say to my students, excuse me, but are you paying me?
Yep.
You've gone to the effort to come and see me. You're paying me a lot of money. The best advice I can give you is listen to what I'm saying.
Exactly. I mean, very few other industries you see in golf where the student comes with these belief systems that they have, and without just listening to you. I mean, if I came to see you for a session, I think you're given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Listen to what you speak.
Yeah.
Listen, embrace what you, as Andrew, is saying. I want to hear Mark, so that's very important.
Mark, what else you got for us? What other nuggets do you have for us? I know you've got a whole boatload of stuff you could talk about, but we got 2 minutes to go, 2 to 3 minutes to go. What else you got?
I mean, give me one quick word, and then make it easy for me, so I can say.
Okay. Shoulders. Let's talk shoulders, scapula. What do you like to see? What's in the lead shoulder?
Yeah.
What's typically the first movement?
In backswing.
Go ahead. Say it again.
In backswing or downswing.
Backswing. Let's talk both. Backswing and downswing.
That's what I was going to say. In backswing, so essentially what makes the shoulder do what it does is the hand. So again, try and move your shoulder without moving the hand and elbow. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Everything the shoulder does is because of where the hand's asking the shoulder to go, which is why hands control movement they get. So how someone moves to that lead wrist and lead hand in that first move. So the hands actually move down at the start of backswing. So the middle of the hand will move down by at least 5, 6, 7 centimeters to start a backswing. So if you move, or the hands move downwards. So that lead. So if you're looking at my left scap, right scap, the lead scap as the rib cage rotates, will just start to very, very gently start to protract and move around that rib cage. Only very, very, very small amount. I'm not looking at huge protraction or elevation or huge rotation of that scap, but it'll just start to protract and walk around that rib cage. But that's in response to what the hand does. Where the lead scap becomes very, very, and this is actually a huge influence on clubhead speed, it actually goes back to your very, very good question, actually. This is probably the main reason why you'll see the club move that way in transition. Is actually because I had the rib cage and lead scap interaction transition. So I'll try and show you, Andrew, from this way, that in transition, in very, very skilled movements, the rib cage rotates independent of the lead arm. So that lead arm will relatively then adduct or compress onto that rib cage. It's that movement which essentially creates this, the myofascial, the tissue response that then exists through our system, that when the rib cage can rotate independently counterclockwise in transition with that lead arm movement, that's what creates that compression, that adduction onto that rib cage. Subsequently, that is then what encourages this. That is a hugely, hugely, hugely powerful movement within golf. Hugely powerful movement.
Very cool.
The ability to rotate the rib cage, as we would call it in England, anti-clockwise, or in the US, counterclockwise. Global audience today. So for the English, it's anti-clockwise, for my American, anti-clockwise. Without the lead arm moving, but that's very, very different answer to compressing the arm.
Yeah, just moving the arm into the rib cage.
That's not that stretch shortness cycle, that elastic recoil. It comes from the rib cage moving independent of the arm. That is then inherently what creates that wonderful hands out, club down movement in transition. Not our
I got you.
attempt to do this. That's a very, very different discussion.
We know.
Yeah. It's you're doing the movement to cause it to happen instead of making it happen.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Okay. Dr. Mark, that's awesome. Thank you so much. I know this. I really appreciate you coming on, Mark, but we are very excited. I haven't really told anyone this, but we're very excited to have you come to Coach Camp this year. Should we be blessed with the opportunity to convene as a group, and it's certainly much later in the year in November, but we're looking to have you there, so that's going to be so exciting. This has been a great discussion. I know you and I can just lock ourselves in a room and chat, and maybe get a bunch of other coaches, maybe get Foley and a couple of Heinekens in here, and we could solve the world's problems. But Mark, really appreciate your insights, your expertise. You've got a great way to you, great way of talking and sharing information. So thank you so much. And to everybody watching, if you missed some of this, and Mark, I'm going to be posting this on my YouTube channel in the next day or two, and I'll share it with you and post it for everybody to watch.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for the invitation. It's been an absolute pleasure. Regarding Coach Camp, it's a real highlight for me this year to be invited. So, I mean, thank you so much for the invitation. And, I really can't wait to spend more time with you.
I'm looking forward to it. I hope we get to do it. I'm sure we will.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. Cheers, eh?
Yeah. Bye.
You can see the Milky Way in Alaska and hear the wind in the trees.